Can't make it, Dad texted about graduation. 2 hours later, Instagram, family dinner, brother's Walmart promotion. I read those words before I even left my apartment, the message glowing against the morning light cutting through the blinds. My name is Camila Hayes, and I had spent 3 years building this day. Working double shifts at a freight company, studying through the noise of delivery trucks outside my window, counting each semester like a rung on a ladder out of exhaustion. Today was supposed to be the summit. The ceremony started at 10. I had told them months ago, printed the invitation, texted reminders. They had promised, "We'll be there, sweetheart." I ironed my gown anyway, smoothed the fabric like it could hide the disappointment. My hands trembled only when I fastened the cap. Dallas heat wrapped around me as I walked toward the university pavilion, streets already glimmering with June haze. Every direction I turned, there were clusters of families, mothers clutching flowers, fathers fumbling with cameras, siblings cheering. I tried to smile, because pretending confidence had always been my armor. Inside, the hall buzzed with music and voices, and I found my seat among the graduates. The chair beside me stayed empty, a quiet shape of everything I'd hoped for. When my name echoed through the speakers, applause rose from strangers polite, brief, anonymous. I lifted the diploma with both hands. It weighed less than the years behind it. That night, when the city cooled and the lights blurred against my windshield, I looked at my phone one last time. Their posts kept refreshing smiles, cake, captions about pride. I whispered to no one. Pride looks different when you earn it alone. If you've ever had your big day forgotten by the people you counted on, tell me your story in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real stories about standing up for yourself. The parking lot shimmered beneath the noonday sunday. The air felt heavier than it should have, the kind of heat that made concrete breathe. I walked slowly toward my car, the diploma case clutched against my chest as if it could replace the people who were supposed to be here. Applause and laughter still echoed from the pavilion behind me like a language I no longer understood. Inside the car, silence was sharp. My phone lit up automatically when I started the engine, one new notification pulsing at the top of the screen. Instagram, Donna Hayes, posted a photo. I opened it before I could think better of it. There it was, my family, Mom, Dad, and my brother, Jason Hayes, all smiling around a restaurant table under soft yellow lights. In front of them, a cake frosted with blue letters. "Congratulations, Jason, shift supervisor." The caption read, "Family dinner." So proud of Jason's promotion at Walmart. Hard work pays off. I stared until the screen blurred. My first thought wasn't anger but confusion, the mind's way of cushioning a fall. They were supposed to be sitting in Section B, clapping, taking pictures of me in a cap and gown. Instead, they had been waiting for their entrees, posing for photos, lifting glasses to celebrate my brother's raise. Every detail in that photo screamed intention: the reservation, the balloons, the matching clothes. Not a spontaneous meal. Not something that came up. This was planned. The truth settled quietly, as if it had always been waiting for me to notice. They chose him. I closed the app, but the image stayed behind my eyes. I had paid their rent for 5 years, $1,500 every month since the day Dad lost his job at the machine shop. "Just until things get better," Mom had said. They did, but the payments never stopped. It had become routine. Me earning, them spending, Jason being celebrated. I did the math once, long ago. $90,000. 90,000 and not one thank you big enough to fill that empty seat at graduation. The thought pulsed in my head until it found rhythm. 5 years. 90,000. One empty row. Numbers that sounded like betrayal when said out loud. The drive home blurred into colorless shapes. The endless strip malls. The gas stations. The heat lines rising from the asphalt. I wasn't crying. That would have meant there was something left to break. There wasn't. Back in my apartment, I placed the diploma on the kitchen counter. The gold letters glowed faintly in the dim light, a symbol of everything I'd done alone. My phone buzzed again. Mom had posted a second story. Jason laughing, his arm around her shoulders, the cake half-eaten. "Proud parents," flashed in cheerful text across the bottom. I laughed then, a sound that startled even me. It wasn't humor, it was disbelief dressed as strength. I scrolled through the comments. Aunts, uncles, friends, so proud of Jason. "You must be such a supportive family." Likes stacked like confetti. The world was applauding them for something I'd paid to sustain. Somewhere between anger and detachment, a switch flipped. I didn't deserve this hierarchy, this silent agreement that my success mattered less because it required no rescue. I had carried them long enough. I sat at my desk, the same one where I'd written countless reports for school, and opened my banking app. The screen bathed the room in a cold blue glow. My thumb hovered over the automatic transfer labeled Parents' Rent. The next payment was scheduled for 3 days from now. The number $1,500 blinked like a challenge. The math in my head turned into a whisper. 5 years, 90,000, one empty seat. I didn't cancel it yet, not that night, but I let the app stay open, the decision breathing beside me like a living thing. The quiet no longer felt like absence, it felt like space, the kind you need before you move. In that moment, under the hum of the refrigerator and the muted city outside, I finally understood what power sounded like. It wasn't shouting. It was silence, and the certainty that soon they would hear it. The night pressed against the windows, the city outside humming with distant traffic. Inside my apartment, the air felt still, heavy with something I couldn't yet name. I sat at the small desk where I had written every paper during grad school, my laptop open, the blue light painting my hands in cold color. On the screen, my banking app waited like an unfinished sentence. It wasn't anger anymore, it was precision. Each thought arriving clean and deliberate, the kind that doesn't shake. 5 years, $90,000, and a text that said, "Can't make it." The numbers lined up like evidence. I scrolled through my transaction history, the same amount, the same date, every single month. The habit of giving had built its own rhythm, and now I was ready to break it. I typed into the family group chat, my fingers steady, my pulse not. Let him pay it. That was all. No punctuation, no explanation, no apology. I hit send and turned the phone face down. The sound of the message whooshing away felt final, like closing a door I'd been holding open too long. Minutes turned into hours, and then the phone began to vibrate. Once, twice, again. The quiet room filled with waves of sound. Notifications, calls, voicemails. Names flashing across the screen. Dad, Mom, Jason, each one lighting up before fading away. I didn't answer. The noise was frantic, uncoordinated, desperate. They were finally noticing the silence I'd been living in. By midnight, the log showed dozens of missed calls. By 2 a.m., it was 85. My inbox bloomed with messages, each new alert overlapping the last until it became a single mechanical pulse. Somewhere in that chaos, I realized not one of them had written a word about the graduation. Every voicemail transcription was about the rent, the payment, the problem I had created by finally stopping the pattern they'd built around me. I didn't listen to any of them. I didn't need to. I could already hear their tones in my mind. Disappointment wrapped in guilt, the kind that sounds like love but always comes with a price tag. At 3 a.m., the calls slowed, then stopped. The apartment exhaled into quiet. I stood and walked to the window. From 12 floors up, the lights of Dallas shimmered like a restless sea. Somewhere out there, in a neat suburban apartment I'd kept afloat for half a decade, they were probably awake too, checking their phones, calling from different numbers, rehearsing excuses. The irony was sharp. They were panicking not because they'd lost me, but because they'd lost the rent. I should have felt guilty. Instead, I felt aware. Aware of how much I'd given, how little they'd noticed, how invisible I had made myself in the name of being responsible. Every time I transferred money, I had bought peace. Tonight, I finally stopped paying for it. I powered down my phone, unplugged the charger, and placed both on the nightstand like setting down a weapon. The room went dark except for the faint glow of the diploma on the wall. It looked different now, not a reminder of who hadn't shown up, but proof of who had done the work alone. For the first time in years, I slept deeply. No buzzing phone, no lingering anxiety about due dates that weren't mine to meet. Just the quiet rhythm of a person who had finally decided to choose herself. In the morning, sunlight crawled across the floor. I made coffee, opened the curtains, and turned my phone back on. 85 missed calls. I scrolled through them like reading a story whose ending I already knew. There was a strange beauty in the finality of it. The absence of messages about my graduation told me everything I needed to know about my place in that family equation. I didn't text back. I didn't explain. I didn't defend. Some debts can't be repaid with words. They had chosen what mattered most to them. Now, I was doing the same. Morning arrived without ceremony. The sky hung flat over Dallas, a shade between silver and beige, as if the day itself didn't want to interfere. I sat at my office desk, coffee cooling beside my keyboard, the glow of spreadsheets waiting for my attention. Work was a quiet relief, numbers behaved, unlike people. By mid-morning, my desk phone rang, an unfamiliar number blinking on the screen. I hesitated before picking up, half expecting another echo of the chaos I'd silenced over the weekend. Instead, A calm professional voice filled the line. "This is Diana Rivera from Oakview Apartments," she said. "You're listed as a financial reference for Patrick and Donna Hayes." For a second, my mind blanked at the sound of my parents' names spoken by a stranger. Diana continued, explaining that the rent due date had passed and no payment had been received. She asked if I knew their situation. My first instinct was to apologize for them, to patch the gap like I always had. The reflex was still there, buried but not gone. But I caught myself before the word sorry could form. "I'm no longer handling their rent," I said. The line went quiet, the kind of pause reserved for uncomfortable truths. Diana thanked me politely, noting that she'd issue a formal notice. The call ended, and the silence afterward felt heavier than the conversation itself. I leaned back in my chair. The faint hum of office chatter surrounded me, ordinary and detached. The reality of what I'd done began to take shape in a tangible way. For 5 years, I'd protected my parents from consequences. Now, for the first time, the world would treat them like adults who'd made choices, and those choices had led here. When I opened my personal phone during lunch, the notifications rolled in again. Dozens of messages, the kind that stacked like noise. I scrolled through them with a detached calm, scanning lines that all sounded the same. Blame disguised as heartbreak. "You're destroying the family. Your mother is crying. Your father's blood pressure is high." Not a single one mentioned my name at that graduation. Not a single word of remorse. The entire script revolved around loss of money, of comfort, not love. Their panic didn't surprise me. What surprised me was my lack of it. I wasn't shaking or doubting. I was observing, as though the part of me that used to rush in with rescue had been quietly replaced by something harder. I realized that guilt only works if you accept it. I deleted the messages one by one, the motion rhythmic, cleansing. The last unread one came from Jason. The preview line read, "You're ruining their lives over nothing." I didn't open it. I didn't need to read the rest to understand the tone, the same superiority, the same assumption that his smallest achievement outweighed anything I could do. By the time I returned to my apartment, the afternoon sun had sharpened into gold. I set my bag down, poured a glass of water, and stood by the window. Below, the city stretched in ordered lines, people heading somewhere with purpose. Somewhere, my family was sitting in that rented apartment, waiting for a payment that would never come. I imagined the tension between them, my father pacing, my mother defending him, Jason scrolling his phone in frustration. Maybe, for the first time, they were realizing that my silence wasn't just absence, it was accountability. I opened my laptop again, more out of habit than need, and checked the same banking app that had started this unraveling. The canceled transfer still showed, gray and final. It was oddly beautiful, that single crossed-out transaction, a line between two lives, the one I lived for them and the one I was beginning for myself. There was no victory in it, no thrill of revenge. Just a stillness, pure and quiet, that tasted like ownership of my own life. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was simply ending the version of me that existed only to be useful. The city lights flickered on one by one. Somewhere in that slow illumination, I found a strange comfort. The world continued, indifferent and steady, no matter who called or didn't call. Days began to stretch longer, as if time itself was watching the fallout with quiet fascination. Emails piled up at work, messages stacked in unread clusters on my phone, and somewhere between both, I felt a strange calm forming like standing in the eye of a storm that used to scare me. The family group chat had turned into a courtroom. Each message was an accusation dressed as concern. "You're being cruel. We raised you better than this. You can't just abandon your parents." I read them once and archived them all. There was nothing new to say, nothing I hadn't already lived through. The guilt had expired. Then a new name appeared on the screen, Nora Flores, my cousin. Her tone was softer, uncertain. "What happened? Your mom says you cut them off out of nowhere." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I sent her a screenshot Donna Hayes' Instagram post with the balloons, the cake, the caption celebrating Jason. Within minutes, Nora replied with 2 words, "That's awful." That was the first time anyone outside the family nucleus said what I already knew. It wasn't rebellion, it was self-respect finally surfacing. Nora's next message came a little later. "They told everyone you're making them homeless." I stared at those words until they blurred. The familiar pattern unfolded in front of me, the rewriting of truth to make me the villain. But this time, I didn't rush to correct it. Let them tell their story. I was done performing in it. That evening, I sat at my desk again, opened my laptop, and began typing not to them, but for myself. The letter started as a draft, then became a declaration. I'm not your bank. I'm not your safety net. I'm not your backup plan for poor decisions. I carried you long enough to forget my own weight. I signed it simply, Camila. Then I copied the text into an email addressed to Patrick and Donna Hayes, subject line, closure. No attachment, no greeting, just the truth, clean and final. When I hit send, the quiet afterward felt like clarity. For years, I'd written checks trying to buy peace. This was the first message that actually gave it to me. Afterward, I contacted HR at my company. It took less than 10 minutes to remove my parents as emergency contacts and beneficiaries. In their place, I listed Nora, the only relative who had believed the version of events that didn't paint me as the villain. I changed the rest: address, numbers, records, every thread that still tied me to the constant extraction disguised as love. That night, I imagined them sitting in the apartment, realizing rent was still unpaid, wondering how far the ripple would go. Maybe they thought I would cave, like before. But this time, my silence wasn't an invitation. It was a wall. A few days later, another email arrived. The subject line read, "Final notice. Payment overdue." I didn't open it. It wasn't mine. The landlord's system had simply kept my address on file from all those years of automated transactions. I deleted it, knowing that the message would find its rightful recipient soon enough. What surprised me wasn't the relief, it was the stillness. The absence of noise. For the first time, I understood how peace could feel like distance, not warmth. People think closure is an event, but sometimes it's just the absence of reaction. Later, while making dinner, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't them, it was Nora. Her message was brief. "They've been calling everyone, trying to find sympathy. It's not working." I smiled without meaning to. The truth had a way of traveling quietly once released. I looked around my apartment, small, modest, but fully mine. The rent I paid covered peace, not dependency. The bills I handled were attached to my name alone. There was no invisible line from my paycheck to someone else's survival. The dishes clinked softly in the sink. Outside, the Dallas night flickered with its usual hum of traffic, but it no longer sounded hostile. It sounded alive, like a city moving forward without waiting for anyone to catch up. Every decision leaves an echo. Mine sounded like freedom. Summer unfolded over Dallas with relentless brightness, as if the sky wanted to spotlight every uncomfortable truth. The weeks that followed carried a kind of silence I hadn't known before. Not peaceful, not empty, but purposeful. Each morning began the same. Coffee, work, focus. The noise had moved elsewhere. News of my parents came quietly, through the corners of conversations and the trickle of family whispers. Patrick and Donna Hayes had received the late payment notice. They'd been charged a fee, small on paper but large enough to echo through their fragile budget. The following week, they signed a new lease, a smaller place, closer to the edge of town. 2 bedrooms instead of 3. One less window, one less illusion of comfort. I didn't celebrate their hardship, but I didn't mourn it either. Actions build outcomes. This was theirs. Patrick had taken a second job at a local warehouse, overnight shifts, light hauling. My mother, Donna, started part-time work at a bakery, the kind that paid in early mornings and sore feet. Even Jason had begun to contribute a token amount toward rent, though relatives said he complained about every dollar. The same people who once told me I should be grateful for family were now whispering about how quickly loyalty dissolves when money runs dry. At work, I found rhythm again. My boss noticed. Within a month, I was promoted to project coordinator, a title that came with more responsibility but, more importantly, peace. The contrast between my life and theirs widened not out of revenge, but simply because I'd stopped syncing with them. There were still small reminders. A mutual friend would mention that my parents had called asking for advice about debt management. Someone from church emailed me to encourage forgiveness. I thanked them politely and deleted it. Forgiveness is a door. It doesn't always need to be opened just because someone knocks. One Saturday afternoon, while running errands, I turned a corner at a grocery store and froze. My father stood by the produce aisle, holding a bag of oranges. He looked older than I remembered. His shoulders slumped, his hair thinned, the kind of wear that doesn't come from age but from weight. He noticed me before I could decide whether to walk away. Our eyes met. There was no anger in his, only something dull, exhausted. He gave a nod that hovered between apology and surrender. I nodded back. No words, no confrontation. Just acknowledgement that we existed in different orbits now. I walked past him without hurry, my cart squeaking slightly on the tile. Outside, the heat wrapped around me like an unfinished argument. I sat in my car, the engine off, air conditioning silent, and realized my hands weren't shaking. There was no bitterness left to hold. The distance had hardened into stability. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and watched the city from my balcony. The skyline shimmered with a kind of indifferent beauty. Somewhere below, people were hurrying home, paying bills, building lives that didn't depend on anyone else's permission. I was one of them now. I thought of Donna, probably rolling out dough before sunrise, and Patrick, driving home from the warehouse at dawn. They were surviving the same way I once had. Maybe survival would finally teach them what gratitude never could. What struck me most wasn't how much they'd lost, it was how much I'd gained by stepping away. My apartment wasn't luxurious, but it was honest. Every piece of furniture had been chosen by me, paid for with hours I'd earned, not borrowed. My walls didn't echo with anyone else's expectations. Freedom, I learned, isn't loud. It's the quiet hum of your own refrigerator in the evening, the gentle sound of traffic fading into distance, the realization that no one owns your exhaustion anymore. I finished my wine and turned off the lights. The darkness didn't feel empty, it felt earned. Autumn arrived quietly, washing Dallas in softer light. The air had cooled enough for windows to stay open, letting in a kind of silence that didn't feel empty anymore. My life had settled into rhythm: work, friends, weekends that belonged to me. There were no unexpected calls, no guilt woven into every quiet hour. One evening after work, I sat at my dining table and began to write a letter. Not out of anger, but completion. The cursor blinked patiently, waiting for the first line. To Patrick and Donna Hayes, I typed. This is my formal request for no further contact. Any attempt to reach me will not be answered. I kept the words plain, respectful, final. When I finished, I printed it, signed my name, and placed it in an envelope. The sound of its sealing was soft but irreversible. The letter wasn't for revenge, it was clarity made tangible. I had spent years cushioning everyone else's consequences. Now, I wanted distance documented, the way people file important truths. Weeks later, whispers made their way to me through distant relatives and old neighbors. My parents' credit score had taken a hit. The unpaid fees had followed them through collections. They were behind on utilities. Jason Hayes, once so loudly celebrated, had lost his shift supervisor position after several late arrivals. The irony wasn't satisfying. It was predictable. When accountability arrives, it never knocks politely. They had downsized again, moving into a one-bedroom unit near the freeway, the kind of place with thin walls and constant noise. I pictured my father working double shifts, my mother budgeting coupons, Jason searching for another job. None of it gave me pleasure, but all of it felt fair. Life had simply adjusted itself to balance. My own days had grown fuller. The promotion at work came with new projects, new people who saw my value without needing an explanation. I joined a volunteer program teaching financial literacy classes for young adults. It was strange to stand in front of a room, explaining how to avoid the very traps I had been raised to believe were normal: dependence, guilt, obligation dressed as love. Every sentence felt like reclaiming something lost. There were moments of reflection, of course. Late at night, I would look at the framed diploma on the wall, its gold letters glowing faintly under the lamplight. I didn't see loss anymore. I saw boundaries built from endurance. It wasn't about punishing anyone. It was about refusing to shrink for people who refused to see me. Freedom doesn't announce itself, it just stops asking for permission. Mine arrived quietly, in the steadiness of my mornings, in the way I no longer rehearsed conversations that would never happen. I had become my own witness. Months passed. An invitation arrived in my inbox from the University Alumni Association. They wanted to feature my story, my rise from working student to project manager. I accepted. When the article went live, it listed my name among notable alumni. I wondered if my parents would see it. Maybe someone would tag them, maybe not. Either way, it didn't matter. Recognition that came from effort didn't need an audience. I never heard from them again. The silence held steady, unbroken. Sometimes people confuse forgiveness with re-entry. I didn't. Some doors stay closed because opening them again would only let the same storm back in. On the last Sunday of October, I went for a walk through a quiet park near my apartment. Leaves scattered around my shoes, gold and fragile. The air smelled faintly of rain. I thought about how endings aren't always loud, they just feel like breathing differently. The weight that once sat between my shoulders was gone. In its place was something lighter, harder to name, maybe peace. Maybe dignity. Maybe both. I stopped near the pond and looked at the reflection of the skyline rippling on the water. It was imperfect, constantly moving, but still beautiful in its own way. That's how I saw my story, now flawed, uneven, but finally mine. What I learned was simple. You can't make people value you, no matter how much you give. The only control you have is over the moment you stop offering what they don't deserve. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to choose yourself over those who never chose you, share your thoughts below.